Hello, this is Chuck Sachs for Indie Opera Podcast, and I'm being joined by CraigHellaJohnson, the founding artistic director and conductor of Considering and music director of Cincinnati Vocal Arts Ensemble. We'll be chatting with Craig about the creation of his oratorio, Considering Matthew Shepard, which is receiving its New York premiere on November 6th in a concert produced by the Dessoff Choirs.
Stories so that we will remember. Try and find the meaning in the living of our days. Always telling stories, wanting to remember.
So hello, Craig. How are you doing today?
Hey, Chuck. I'm doing well. It's great to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking your time to join me. So I finally listened to all of the oratorio, the recording today. And it's fascinating and gorgeous and just exactly the kind of choral music that I both want to listen to and sing. And I do miss that part. Definitely. Now, what drew you to this? Because I know from reading articles and everything that, I mean, we all knew what happened to Matthew Shepard in 1998, but you didn't actually write this until 2012. What was the delay? Was it, figuring this out, finding the right collaborators?
Well, I right after Matt died, that experience really pierced my heart. I just, as it did so many, for so many of us, we were affected, people around the globe. That story just found resonance and tragically so with so many of us. But I felt at the time just compelled to respond in some way. It's such a visceral reaction. And so a seed was planted at that time to want to do something. Maybe I'd write a song, maybe I'd write a text. So, at first it was sort of just a thought of something small. And then, from time to time, there would be this thought about, maybe I could write a passion for Matthew Shepard because the passions of Bach and, they were very close to both my heart and my work. So that was in my mind, and it just sort of rattled around my brain for quite a while. And to be honest, it just sort of kept doing that for years. I never kind of set to it. I think a part of it was simply that it was such an enormous story. It meant so much to so many people that in a way, I think I was probably kind of avoiding really confronting this. Would I really do something with this? And so, but at some point, as you said, around 2012, I thought, I do want to do this. I think I was feeling just some fear to sort of, if I was going to handle this story in any way, it was so important to so many people, and I wanted to try and do it justice and take care of it well, be a good steward of the story and the events. And so, yeah, but I felt compelled for a long time to do something around the life and death of Matthew Shepard. And so it just stayed with me. And that at some point I started to write some music, and then not too deep in that process, I thought I really need to check in and see if I can get the blessing of his parents, Judy and Dennis. And so was very grateful after meeting them and having time to tell them about this, that they really endorsed this project. So and that's where it all got started for me.
Well, I know also reading, you'd probably written shorter choral works and adaptations and arrangements before this. This was your first major work.
Certainly. Yeah. And so I'm sure that is a big part of my stalling too, because I knew it was going to be big, and I wasn't just, writing oratorios every day. So yeah, it was a big deal. And definitely my largest project for sure. But it had been writing, more kind of on the practical end. I was really writing things for Conspirare. Sometime if there was a program that needed a little something or that was just lacking a this or a that, much like a sort of active church musician might do, it was along the lines of that. And certainly for me too, initially I thought I never had any intention of even publishing the things because they were all just for my own practical use with my colleagues. And then, the music has taken a different journey since then when I was encouraged to share them a bit. Yeah.
I do understand that. I come from also a background of being a music director in synagogue and a music director in a church. And there were points where you come up and go, I really hate this arrangement. It's like, or why wasn't this ever written as a choral arrangement? And it just started growing so that eventually I wrote a full-length service of my own that was then presented. It is, I of course had the experience of having written a lot of musical theater before that. So I called it a concert Shabbat. It's kind of akin to a shorter version of Mass with that kind of theatrical feeling to it.
Oh, yeah.
But also, in terms of writing something like this about Matthew Shepard, it's the same thing people have had issues writing about 9/11, is that you really actually do need some space and time to get your head around it. And sometimes the best pieces are the ones that are come at a little sideways, that don't hit it right directly on the head. And I also feel that the oratorio does that. There's the recitations, which are really direct, but the choral parts are more abstract in a sense. And I really liked that about it too. Now, I know you went and used certain sections from Leslea Newman's work, but also I know there was named Michael Dennis Brown. And it looks like he actually wrote, did he write new text for this or at that time?
Yeah, as you mentioned, the wonderful poems of Leslea Newman were kind of early on in my process. I had very much wanted to include this idea of the fence as witness and the fence as observer. That was really big in my thinking, and so I had wanted to figure out how I could make that happen sort of dramatically and within the concept of this piece. And after a good bit of wrestling too, I happened upon this book, which I just hadn't known before, October Mourning, these poems that Leslea wrote she was in Laramie when the night Matt was taken and beaten. And they're incredible poems. And so she gave me the permission to use those. I use those as kind of structural points in the piece, the fence poems, I call them. And then Michael Dennis Brown is a writer and librettist and poet in Minneapolis. He had done a lot of work prior to my getting to know him with Stephen Paulus, the composer. They'd created a lot of works together. And so I went to Michael sort of late in my process. I knew where I was wanting the piece to go within the structure. I kind of knew what I wanted to express. And I really wanted someone to flesh that text out. So I would download all kinds of ideas, thoughts about this is where we are, this is where I want it to go. Here's, a list of words. And then he would craft these. Some of the things we co-wrote together as well. But he was involved in the last probably 5 months, 6 months of my process, very, very actively involved. And I'm very grateful to him. He just did a beautiful job to sort of partner and dance with me. And he's one of those unique librettists who is also willing to sort of hear music first. So we would go both ways, but, I would share music. Like, here's the conception, here's the meter, here's the actual syllabic stress kind of, and he would write into that very specifically too. So it was a great gift at that point in the process.
Yes, I know the gift that lyricists and librettists can be, and sometimes it completely changes your mind about where you're going with something. So this was premiered. It was recorded before it was actually live premiered. Am I correct?
No, it's the premiere of the full version of this. We did a workshop performance in 2014, but the full version of this was premiered in 2016 in February. And then we recorded it just after that, late February, early March of 2016.
And that premiere was down in Texas, in Austin.
It was in Austin, yep.
And what response was there? Because I mean, Austin is much more open and everything than we consider certain parts of Texas. But what was the response in terms of audience and press to it?
Yeah, it was really a huge response. I mean, the work was really embraced. It's been an extraordinary experience sort of for the history of the performances too, that the people have really taken this in very deeply. I appreciate it. I left the title for the workshop in 2014 was Considering Matthew Shepard. It felt like this is exactly what I'm doing, and taking a risk to even do it. And so that was our workshop title. But as I wrestled with, what to call it finally, I really wanted to keep that title. I had some great sort of friends who are deep in the business who really advised me to keep it too. And so glad I did, because there was a way in which this is what the piece is, an invitation to, through this music, consider not just Matt's story, but consider this whole idea of hate and this terrible human habit we have of projecting all that is unsolved in our own hearts and lives and projecting it onto others. And this is a dreadful human habit, I guess I'll say. And so, but my invitation was, could you consider also your part, as you observe this, just to consider the story, how does it impact, where does it point to you in your own journey, and kind of, and so I think there was a sense I had at those first performances too, that people really bought in and they invested in this. It was a shared journey in those first concert performances. And yeah, those were beautiful days. I'll never forget it. And just a very deep embrace of the work, and Austin audiences, certainly throughout Texas here too, where we've been, but Austin audiences have continued to want to keep seeing it sort of revived. And we toured it in 2018. I think we were to maybe 28 or 30 cities across the country. Yeah, so it's good memories of those early performances.
Now, have there been rewrites along the way, or rewrites, say, before publication? Because they sent me a libretto today, and I'm listening, going, I did notice, interesting, they were like, one piece is on the recording, but not in the libretto, and one piece is in libretto and not in the recording. I'm talking about Passion 24, Gently Rest, Dear Lullaby, and the one that seems to be missing is Thanks, which is, I think, Epilogue 31.
Are you talking about in the Dessoff performance coming up?
No, actually, the libretto they sent me it's supposedly, they didn't tell me that was for Dessoff only.
No, yeah, because I think Dessoff is doing some shortening of some movements. I haven't really seen the complete list, so I don't know where that has landed. So you'll hear it probably. But yeah, there haven't been huge changes. I would say the primary changes, the one you mentioned, Gently Rest, it's kind of a favorite moment in the piece, actually, but as we say, kill your darlings, I felt like I needed to remove it there from the piece, because as we performed it over and over, I kept feeling that there was a redundancy there. From the movement Dear Song too, it sort of said the same thing twice. Remarkably, with that movement, it had another very specific purpose that, and this was very touching to me, but we were invited to sing at the National Cathedral when they had the interment of Matt's ashes there, right in the Columbarium area where Helen Keller is buried and many others. It is, notable individuals. And it was a very, very special day, and it was very important to the Shepards, and very moving service. And they had asked Conspirari to come and sing. And based on what Eugene Robinson, who preached that service, and many of the texts, this Gently Rest was the perfect piece to kind of find. So I think that's what that movement was meant for, was that very Sunday. And other changes, we actually performed the complete work. So it might just have been a libretto that you got that had something missing. That surprises me. But I think I just shortened some things. There's some repeats, things like that. Take a little bit of a B section out or something. But otherwise, we perform it pretty much complete. And I think occasionally there are some folks, once a work is published and out in the world, I know folks are doing, what Handel did, and and I don't have any opportunity to hear it or bless it, but I'm sure that that's happening.
Well, and saying name Handel, you don't really use reference Handel in the work that maybe you do, but I know there's definite quote from J.S. Bach's it's the Prelude in C major, and then some Hildegard von Bingen music, and yet there are also pieces that allude to that style. What brought you to such a pastiche of styles? Because there's country, there's some yodeling, there's a large variety of choral styles which I enjoy. Even the wonderful, my infamous thoughts about the breaking of words up so you don't understand their exactly words. I have one composer I work with that there's like 20 words of text for the piece, and it's like, what did we just sing? But you did it a little less and more understandable, I want to say.
Yeah, well, that pastiche element, it was very intentional to I was trying to represent a broad tent of inclusivity with this as a listening experience, sort of as a shared listening experience. And there's a way in which, the Gregorian chant type piece stands next to the choral polyphony. Those things aren't unusual, but then those stand next to that quasi blues jazz ballad, next to something that might sound like a sort of country folk song. And there's a real mixing of sort of elements too in the penultimate movement, All of Us. There are, it's on the surface very much sort of a gospel treatment, but there's a solo soprano trio, which for me very much in my mind reference to the three oboes in many Bach cantatas. There's a big chorale in that last movement. So there's a lot of that placement. Certainly there's a decent bit of Bach influence. There's some Britten references from Ceremony of Carols. And as you mentioned, Hildegard, it's sort of meant to sort of represent a broad human family, certainly in the listening experience, and also meant to be in that sort of statement of inclusivity. Because very often we can be in the place that these musics sort of can't live next to one another, and so this was something that was in the original intention and meant to hold that sort of image and that representation. Now,
has the piece ever been fully staged? Because I know Dessoff Choirs said they're lightly staging it, but it does seem like it lends itself to that kind of a full theatrical evening.
Yeah, it's been a pretty broad spectrum, Chuck. For example, right after the premiere, I did it at Harvard. They had invited me to come and do it, and that was a strictly stand on stage, as we say in the crass way, park and bark.
Yes.
So that, and I was very happy to have the experience that the piece really held its content and its sort of substance with that approach, and it's been anything from there to almost fully staged. Some people I've been approached many times, could this be something that could be revised in a way of almost a Broadway production, like very fully, and I've resisted that because I've very much like the hybrid nature of it. I like having that experience of someone say, is this opera? Is this oratorio? Is this musical theater? Is it a song cycle? Is it, I want that sort of tension in it. And, but yeah, when we take it on the road, we've done, I would say, sort of moderately staged. And I know that, I think they're going to do a pretty extensive staging in New York in February at Wall Street Trinity I think there was quite a staged version in Barcelona. I wasn't there, but when they did the European premiere a couple of years ago. So it's kind of runs the gamut.
But it definitely fits into what we would call contemporary music theater, and the place that people thought this, would say it's to this, it's to that, is broken open, and it is exactly right for the time and the period of what's happening in opera and in music theater. I'm going to have to cut this short a little because I have to go up to Turandot, but I want to know, what has it been like when did you start up choir practices again there in Austin? What has it been like still in pandemic times?
Yeah. Well, Chuck, we just had our very first rep last week, our first rep in 600 days it was. We went without being together. And our singers come from all over the country, so it's also the matter of flying them here. And so it was a very special week for us to be together again. And I know choirs all over the place are feeling this gift of cautiously entering back in. We did our whole rehearsals and performances with masks, and everyone in the ensemble and everyone in the audience needed to show proof of vaccination and wear masks also. And so, there are all these strange layers that still exist, but it's also very touching because one feels in it the generosity of everyone to say, we care about each other. That's why we're doing this. It feels it's a hassle, it's inconvenient, it's all of that. But I was touched by what still can transmit, from behind these masks. We opened with Joby Talbot's wonderful piece, Path of Miracles. And I was delighted at the way it spoke very powerfully to the audiences, and the singers just felt invested. We all feel different. We've been changed, and that's good. We should be changed by something so profoundly huge. But I do feel like all of us felt like we were just so aware of the incredible preciousness and sacredness of this act of live music together that we get to do. So I feel just a lot of gratitude.
Now, are the masks specifically created so that it makes it easier to sing? Because I know we have a lot of opera companies creating specific things like that, music theater companies.
Yeah, we did a lot of research, and we had a recommended mask, and we were recommending just because we thought it provided the needed safety, but also they were a little lighter. There was a little more breathing room. There are many folks who have created singer masks now, and we kind of picked our favorite of 10 and recommended them, but we allowed singers to sing in whatever mask they wanted to cover, as long as it was concert black.
All right. Well, this has been delightful. I wish I could go longer, but I wish you more amazing concerts. I'm looking so forward to Dessoff Choirs production on November 6th. And thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just wish everyone at Dessoff wonderful performances. I'm very grateful that they are taking on this work. I know it's a lovely ensemble. So thank you very much, Chuck, and enjoy the opera too.
And so please consider supporting Indie Opera Podcast and Patreon. This has been Chuck Sachs with CraigHellaJohnson, and thank you for listening.